Welcome everyone to Professional Services Growth Live. I'm Sam Page from Passel, and today we're discussing data and analytics. Data within marketing has a bit of a strange relationship. On one hand, it's kind of the lifeblood of marketing and the basis of making good decisions and feeding back to the firm. And on the other hand, people often dismiss data and analytics as difficult to get right, inaccurate, and potentially not useful for making decisions. So we're really lucky to be joined by Sarah Strachan here from the client success team at Passel. Sarah works every day with some of the largest and most successful professional services firms in the world, and she helps them with collecting, analyzing, understanding the data that's available to them, particularly with an eye to using that data within the business to demonstrate the value of what marketing can achieve and then to drive further results in the future. So Sarah, thanks so much for coming on. It's really, really great to have you on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Sam. Really excited to be on and a great topic to discuss. And thank you everyone for joining. Going to have a good 45 minutes.
So if you haven't been on the stream with us before, it's a live Q&A. So if you've got questions around data and analytics, if you've got a particular thorny problem in your side that you're dealing with today, pop that into the chat. If there's something you'd like us to explore around one of the questions that we're asking, get that into the chat as well, because Sarah and I will have a crack at it. And also, if you feel like that you've got an answer to one of the questions that we're asking on the agenda or that's being asked by one of the other attendees, chuck that in the chat as well. We're definitely keen for this to be really interactive. So the first question I've got here on our agenda, Sarah, for us to discuss is the role of analytics within an effective marketing setup. So from your perspective, working with a lot of different teams across a lot of different firms, how do you see that? How do you see the role of marketing in an effective setup?
So, I mean, there's lots of things that are going to make, analytics and data effective in marketing. From what I've seen, I mean, analytics is a tool. So analytics, like any other tool, is only as effective as, the implementation of it. So within a marketing setup, it's not only important to have that, data analysis going on and that data available, but it's also really important that you're using that data and that you're making sure that it's actually going to be useful down the line. So, I mean, in marketing particularly, you're going to be using data analysis to help you make those strategic decisions, to help you understand what's working well, what marketing projects have been effective, where you should spend most of your time, what different outcomes have been of different things. But also what's really important in marketing, and what I've picked on certainly from working with marketers within, these big professional service firms, is that this data is really important to, show the value of what you're doing within your marketing project. And me and Sam were just talking before everyone came on about a firm that we know who's actually doing a case study around every single marketing project they have and delivering that feedback and that case study around the firm. And it's certainly what I suggest for my clients to do. So when they're rolling out Passel as a content strategy, I make sure that they're actually sharing regular feedback and collecting data around the success of Passel and also of the content that's being written. But that should apply across all marketing projects as well. So not only within Passel and within content, but make sure that everything that you're doing within marketing, you're collecting data. And obviously that's to an extent because you can't collect data on every single thing, but pretty much most things you can do now. So make sure you're analyzing, collecting the data, looking actively for what data you can collect, and then really reporting that around the firm and using it to, gain insight and make strategic decisions further down the line.
Yeah, I really like that idea of demonstrating value through data and insights. I think there's from the successful teams that I've been in, there's sort of three parts to it. The first is making decisions, so using data to choose a course of action. The second is gauging success, so figuring out how well you've achieved the target that you set out to achieve. And the third part of that is building trust. So within a business, most people don't understand marketing as well as they should. Given that most businesses are trying to grow, people don't really understand the function of marketing, and they don't have a trust of marketing as a function often. So using quality, relevant data that people understand and can see the value of the work that you're doing, that's so critical. And that's not something that you can do once and one and done. That's something that you have to deliver regularly across the year, which is why that approach from Alvarez and Marcel that Sarah's mentioning there is brilliant, because it's a lot of effort, but ultimately that's what gets you the trust to go forward and make decisions based on instinct, which you often have to do. You have to have earned that trust, and using those analytics is a very valuable way of doing that.
Yeah, it's a very tangible way, to show an outcome that you've achieved, and it's just something we don't see a lot. And I'm surprised at how little I see it across marketing. Actually, showing the value of what you're doing, reporting that not only within those that are involved in that marketing project, but firm wide, and actually gaining some recognition for yourself and building your own personal brand, which, sometimes doesn't come that naturally to people to do that.
Yeah, there's often that a bit of ego building or ego boosting or imposter syndrome or whatever you'd say. People a bit afraid of shouting about the good things that marketing have done, and data helps you do that.
Yeah, completely.
So the next question that we've had in, what are the best examples you've seen of marketers using analytics to demonstrate value?
I mean, from my clients that I've been working with, especially over the past 2 years, it's really important, and you get the most successful outcome when you're actually using this data to work towards an objective. So as I said, data is a really tangible way, of showing that something's working. So actually, it's really important to set KPIs to actually reach that objective and be able to measure, the outcome of what you're doing against those KPIs. So the most successful firms that I've worked with for those marketing projects, such as rolling out a content program, they've set KPIs along the way. Now, they're not just doing that once for one time period, they're doing that regularly, but they're also making sure that they're measurable so that you can actually, look at the data and make sure that you're, putting that data and aligning it with those KPIs. So, I mean, just to go over a few examples of what our clients would regularly collect for KPIs to do with content. So, for example, if you're running a content program and the end goal is to be more active online as a firm, to really put your voice out there in the market, the KPIs that you can set that are going to make sure that you achieve that might be firstly around user engagement. So how many users that you want creating this content, how many posts that you expect over that time period, very much the percentage maybe of the people within your firm that are creating content or within that certain sector. Also very much looking at the social media side of things. So looking at the increase in LinkedIn activity of the individuals in your firm or your firm as a whole. Maybe, going on to Google Analytics and looking at the increase in LinkedIn referrals to the website on the back of sharing these insights and the content. I mean, there's loads, there's to go on. You can set a KPI around engagement. So actually the number of key clients who are engaging with your content on a regular basis or, within that set time period. And then maybe one around events as well is what we commonly see. So very much how many event posts that you're writing within that time period. And if you can then measure these KPIs and measure success against them, and if you're reaching them, it's really easy to then, link that with an outcome in the future. So for example, if you're being asked as a firm or there's certain people within your firm who are being asked to speak regularly at events because they're seen as the expert within that market, and you look back at the KPIs that you've set over the past 6 months and you've hit the KPI of how much content you're producing around events, over how many events you're attending or webinars nowadays, then you're very likely know that KPI has contributed to that end goal. But obviously, if you didn't collect any data or didn't set that KPI in the first place, it's hard to know what's actually contributed to that.
Yeah, so maybe to just unpack that, there's something really, really interesting you said in there around, um, and potentially it's one of those really obvious kind of head smacking things of set the KPI first before you
Yeah,
collect the data. And we all know that we should do it, but often don't.
yeah,
If you find after the campaign, we're scrambling to figure out what positive data we could possibly be reporting on, and that's not necessarily a bad thing to find any positive data, but if you don't set those KPIs up front, you don't have that kind of accountability. You don't have that really clear focus,
yeah.
and you use the data to build what those KPIs are. Um,
Yeah,
something else.
always set KPIs that you know you can collect with that data. And it is an extra step to do before, but it's so worth it in the outcome. And it's always one that people forget to do, or it's on their radar and you know you should do it, but you missed it off. But I promise you, if you do set them, you will thank yourself after that project's finished.
It's one of those things where when you're approaching a marketing campaign, there's so many things to do, that setting detailed, measurable KPIs can be swept under the million other things around getting the technology right, getting the approvals right, finding the sign off, getting the budget, doing all those things. And then the KPIs, often the specific marketing KPIs, which often only apply to the marketing team, get left behind. I like the interesting thing about that approach that you've just gone through there, Sarah, is that all of those KPIs work together. So you have the really leading indicators of how much content are we creating. That's not particularly interesting to the business, but when it works with the other pieces of KPI that you've invested in there, so stuff like the traffic as well, can be often seen as, so what, traffic for traffic's sake, who cares? When you blend the amount of posts we've created with the traffic gained, and then with something that's slightly more manual, more difficult to collect, like the actual firms that we've reached, whether that be on LinkedIn or whether that's with some sort of lead identification tool, like HubSpot or Marketo or Leadboxer or something like that. Once you blend those different KPIs together and those different metrics together, you're building a picture between the marketing activities and the business outcome. And
Yeah.
that's when that reporting becomes interesting. So I think from what I've seen of professional services reports and from those case studies and things like that, the most successful firms are the ones that combine layers of KPIs from leading indicators that at the top end are very marketing data statistics that aren't particularly that interesting on their own to the business. When you layer those in with other things, then you start to build a more interesting, more useful picture.
Yeah, that's when you start to add insight and value. And you touched on a good point there. Obviously, analytics isn't isn't the only way you can gain insight. It's a really important way. But there's other things that you can then link that with. But as long as you have that as a foundation, you're always going to be in a better position when you're completing that marketing project, looking for insight, trying to make decisions, or reporting back on the success.
We've just had a question here. And this is something that we're seeing a lot more at the moment. As data and analytics becomes more complex, becomes more complex on one side, but also more critical on the other hand, there's often a call or people suggesting that data should be a separate function within a marketing team or within a law firm. And I'm sure that there are other areas, but the marketing data and business development data should be a separate function. What's your take on that? Are you seeing much of that, and do you think that's the way it should be?
I mean, I don't ever think it should be a completely separate function. I think obviously there are going to be, experts in complex data analysis, which you're going to need within a firm. But I always think you have to have a link between those, data experts, the people collecting data, and the people who are making those marketing decisions, who are setting those objectives. So actually, if a data expert is analyzing this data, they're going to have a better idea of how to analyze it to get the best results if they actually have an overview of the marketing objectives or, the KPIs that this data is going to be used towards. And at the same time, marketing should have an idea and a visibility over how data is collected within the firm, where it's coming from, so that they know how best to use it. They know how best to set these KPIs that are going to be measurable and that you can use the data for. So it works both ways. Obviously, if it's separate within a firm, that's not the end of the world. But as long as there is still a connection between both sides, I know there's still going to be separate expertise. But then we've also seen in firms marketers who are really good at data analysis now, and obviously that just joins the dots between collecting the data and then being able to implement it and use it for business outcomes.
Yeah, so there's a need there for an insight to be generated, or for a good idea or an understanding of what's happening. You need to understand both the data and the market. And so if you can have a separate data team that understands the market as well as the marketing team, I'm not sure that's something that can be done. But equally, it's very difficult to understand in-depth implementation and configuration of data gathering platforms and data analysis techniques. That's not always right at the heart of a marketing role. So I think in an ideal world, maybe you've got an ability to call in a specialist, access to a specialist, but at the heart of a marketer's role, or at least in that marketer's role, is understanding how data and the business and the market come together to grow the firm. And that's definitely, there definitely needs to be a good understanding of data and analytics within the marketing team to achieve that, for sure.
There 100% needs to be a link. It's just there's so much data out there. It's being used more and more. There's more pressure for firms to use the data. I mean, there's so many softwares out there that firms have now. There's so much data within that that's just not being used as well. So yeah, the more communication there is between marketing and data experts, and more oversight of actually, why the data is being used, I mean, the better the outcomes are going to be.
I think there's value as a marketer within your career to be maybe not the person that understands data, but the person that understands the market. And data is a window to that market. I think often when people start their careers as marketers, they're on the ground floor. They're the ones that are sending the emails, that they may be meeting the people at the events. They're the ones that are seeing firsthand the interactions between the firm and the market. And as people get more and more senior in their positions, they become less and less, they become more and more removed from that actual day-to-day interaction and how things are going. And so understanding data and being the source of, or being part of that understanding of what's happening within data is a way of bringing that back to your career. If I put it this way, if you were in marketing and you're starting off your career, you definitely want to be giving yourself a better understanding of data as a way of retaining your value as you become more senior, and as a vehicle to becoming more senior as well.
Yeah, definitely. Position yourself as the expert as much as you can. It doesn't have to be in that complex data analysis, but, provide that link between marketing and the data collection, or use technology that maybe your firm's not using or utilizing as much. The more you can place yourself as an expert within the firm in a certain area, the better it's going to be essentially for your career. And analytics is a great way to do that, because I still don't believe many people within organizations are really using analytics or data.
Yeah, there's that ability to be the source of value, I think, for sure.
There's a lot of opportunity and there's a lot of resource to, help you get started with that.
Possibly something that feeds into that question that we've just had through is, how far should you go in the pursuit of accuracy? And I know we've actually got something that might be worth showing for this, so I'll share my screen in just a tick here. But Sarah, I just put that question to you. How far should you go in pursuit of accuracy with your data and analytics?
Yeah, no, this is a really good question. I think there's something good we can show off the back of this. But I mean, obviously you have to be accurate in data analytics. But I think it's easy to get caught up on accuracy. mean, the most important thing is that this data is going to be useful. Of course, it has to be accurate as well, but you might spend a lot of time making sure this data is perfect, that it's collected in the right way and it's really accurate. But if you're not using it, for outcomes, to gain insight, or to show the value in what you're doing, then it just goes to waste really that time. So make sure the data that you're collecting is useful. And then one thing I would also recommend is what I think we're going to show you, is to make sure that you're adding another dimension to this data. So stuff like tools like Google Analytics, you can collect data. You might want to look at website traffic, and that's great to report on that, but you can always delve a bit further in to get a bit more insight. I think we're going to show you some examples of that now.
Yeah, so similar to that idea we were just talking about before of adding layers to your KPIs, adding layers to your metrics as well makes them more useful. So a flat number of people coming to a website is not as useful as a number compared to that same period the year before. A flat number of about traffic is not as useful as that same number, but broken down into channels. The more you're able to add dimensionality to your data, the more useful that's going to be for, one, finding insights, but two, also reporting on those insights. So we're going to look very, very quickly at a couple of things here. I've got a couple of things to show, and then I think Sarah also, there's one particular thing that you also really wanted to dive into. So this is Sarah, can you see my screen there?
Yep, can see that.
Perfect. So we've got here a segment view in Google Analytics, and this is something that if you're reporting through Google Analytics, you need to be definitely aware of and understand how to build these. Segments work by taking your data and showing you a small sliver of it, depending on what conditions you want to set. So you could look at just traffic coming through mobile. You can look at just people that have completed a form. You could look at traffic that went to a specific goal completion page. You can do all of this with a segment. And why this is so powerful is that you can do backward looking segments. So filtering your data in analytics is sometimes difficult because you need to know what you're filtering beforehand. With a segment, you can look backwards across a time period and segment your traffic for that time period. So for this is just a really standard segment. We're looking at a Passel blog that sits on its own subdomain, and we've set the subdomain to be host name equals blog.passel.net, and it's as simple as that. And then this traffic will show us that individual blog. So if you've got multiple blogs, you could group them together by using an OR function. If you've got a blog that you wanted to hone down on some particular posts, you could use an AND function to do that. The second part of this is looking at time. So once you've understood how to segment your data and look down into a particular element, you might want to add a time condition or a time dimension to what you're doing. So this is quite an interesting segment here we've just set up. So this comes from across the Passel network, and we're looking at a sample of firms who use Passel, who published before COVID and after COVID, before the lockdown and after the lockdown. So we're looking from the start of April to the 30th of June. So this is after the lockdown in the UK. So if we compare that, we just do a simple time comparison. So we compare that to the previous quarter. So we're going to do Q1 versus Q2. So you have Q1 there in orange and Q2 in blue. So you can see as we start on the 1st of January, not very many people with their New Year's Eve hangover jumping on to read Passel posts, but that increases to a sort of normal level for these firms. And then as the lockdown happens and everyone goes into this very uncertain state, they want to understand more about what's happening, and firms equally are producing more insight around what's happening. That number then reaches its peak and then reaches back to a normal level, which then becomes the blue line. So by adding that data metric, we get so much more insight into what's happening. We understand now the effect of that lockdown as compared to normal. We can see how that affected stuff like pages per session. So people were actually looking at fewer pages and staying for around a minute as opposed to 3 minutes. So people wanted to consume shorter content because they potentially were busy, or they were more stressed, or there was more short content available for them. We're also seeing a lot of, and a much greater percentage of new users and old users coming back. We're seeing a high percentage of sessions, all of this. So by adding that date comparison, we get so much more data from this. Sarah, do you want to talk about comparing specific segments within one segment to another segment within each other?
Yeah, definitely. So this goes nicely with the last example we showed. So the same time period we're looking at here. So we're looking at Q2. So really when everyone started working from home and we were in full lockdown, we're looking again at the users being driven into the website. And this is some dummy data here. But what the blue line shows across this time period is all website traffic. So across all pages of the website. So we've created that segment. But then what the second segment shows, and this is really where you're delving into this data a bit more to gain insight. This is actually segmenting out the Passel blog. So you're able to compare the Passel blog and how much traffic that's driving compared to, the rest of your website, which includes the blog as well. And this is really, really insightful, because what you might have had, or what you might have seen from the original report Sam sent, you might have seen an increase in traffic to your whole website. Now, that might be great to share with the firm. You might get a pat on the back in marketing, for helping people write content and, showcasing the importance of being present digitally now that we're all working from home. But actually, to gain more insight and show more value, if you're able to pull out this segment, you can actually show how the blog specifically is contributing to that traffic. So these are the two segments. We've got all the website data, and then we've got the data just for the blog as an example. You can see the data here over the time period, but I'm just going to focus on the bottom point here. So you can see LinkedIn down at the bottom. Now, what this is looking at is referral traffic. So referrals from LinkedIn into the website. So over this time period, you can see for the whole website, which is the blue segment at the top, but there has been 1,235 referrals over that time period from LinkedIn. That's people clicking into a link from LinkedIn that takes you to the website. But then if you actually segment and pull in the segment of the blog, you can see that actually 1,135 out of those are landing on the blog. So the blog, work that out, is responsible for roughly 90% of all LinkedIn referrals over that time period. So that's obviously something you can report on and go into a bit more detail to show that the blog is really contributing to driving all this new traffic in. So really, that's where you should focus your efforts, and that's where you should get the recognition as a marketer who's probably very actively involved in helping, the employees write that content or helping content go onto the blog.
So there's that idea of layering your data. So in our blog for this time period, we had 8,319 visitors, which is great. But so what? If we can compare that to another time period and show the increase, perfect. But if we can also show that as a fraction of the total website, that then becomes really interesting. If we can add another dimension, maybe we can add the number of authors who contributed to that blog. So we had 50 fee earners that contributed those insights. They were responsible for driving 60, 70, 80% of the traffic across the blog or across all of our knowledge base, whatever that is. So more dimensions gives you more interesting outcomes, more interesting insights that you can then report on and use to make more decisions.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
That's great, Sarah. Yeah, thanks so much for that.
And it's worth it if you're in Google Analytics, having a bit of a play around with that and, building out a bit of a template for what you then want to regularly report on. We often show the LinkedIn referrals example because it's so powerful, because a blog often is such a big contributor to driving in traffic from LinkedIn. And this isn't really that reported around a firm, but, we started reporting on that data, seeing positive outcomes, and it's a great bit of data to show now. But obviously, the more you can show that data or research what data is going to be useful and what, is going to really sit with people, what people are going to go wow to around your firm, then actually that's the best data to be collecting. So have a bit of a dig around. You'll know within your firm, the data that's going to be the best to report on, and then make sure you're building that into your strategy going forward.
So we've just had a question here in the chat. This is from Jay. I hope I've said that right. Jay, do you want to ask that question? Actually, I'll just turn on the mics here if you want to. If you want.
Hi, I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, yeah, perfectly loud and clear.
I'm not sure my camera's on. Sorry. Just a question about qualitative data. So going sometimes beyond the numbers. I've come from a previous role where we externally worked in an agency and conducted client feedback for firms, and it just seemed like the most valuable thing ever. And then now, since I've moved in-house, I've seen a bit of a resistance in-house to firstly encourage buy-in and approval for that, but secondly to kind of try and get partners and senior associates to let us access speaking to their clients and in gaining qualitative data, and I just wonder whether you see it as valuable as quantitative data. Obviously big numbers certainly mean more, but is there still an appetite really for that from your experience of the wider market?
Well, from my side, 100% yes. I mean, we always we have the quantitative data that forms, a really good background to that data. It's really solid. But then we also say, don't just focus on the vanity metrics. So don't just focus on those headline numbers, but actually bringing in that quantitative data is fantastic. So just an example for the feedback we give at Passel, we instruct our clients to give. We've obviously got those headline numbers, Google Analytics traffic, LinkedIn referrals, lots of different stats, which are great. But then we do tell them to delve down a bit more into actually, well, great, you've got 100 people engaging with this content, but now let's go a step further and pick out who they are. And then, are they, if they're 10 of your key clients, and that's going to be successful. Whereas, you might have 100 engagements on one post and have 1 or 2 clients. You might have 15 engagements on another post, but actually they're 14 of your clients. So it's really important to do that from our perspective.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I think there's a quote we always talk about, and it's from David Ogilvy, and I'm gonna butcher it completely, but it's don't count the people you reach the people who count. Reach people that count, and that I think that's it. So I would maybe even disagree with the statement that big numbers mean more. Sometimes, especially in professional services, where 1 or 2 clients picked up each year or each quarter can represent a huge growth for the firm. Feedback from people like that is so invaluable.
Huge, yeah.
I think the challenge maybe is to blend the data approach with that feedback, and that's going to be difficult if you don't have access to the clients at all. Advice there would be try and pick your fee earners or your people who are most likely to give you that feedback and support them as much as you can with data, so that you build a relationship with them, so that when that feedback comes in, you're there to receive it. We've got a couple of things that we'd often do. So Sarah was saying there, we often encourage people to talk about which of their clients they've interacted with and engaged with their content. We would often take some of that feedback if clients are saying how much they enjoyed reading the insights, or that if you just get a soundbite from them that says, we saw those insights and it was interesting to us, that's really, that's perfect. That adds narrative, it adds context, it adds so much depth to any report that you're doing. So I can't speak highly enough of qualitative data.
Definitely combine them.
It's difficult to get. Hey.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, no worries at all. Thanks, Jaya. If anyone else has got questions, chuck that in the chat. We've got someone here. So Charles is saying, if you can tell a story, numbers are more effective. So that's someone in the chat there. Yeah, I would agree 100%, Charles, and that bleeds into Jaya's question there. If you can add a story to the numbers, then that's something that creates a stronger memory structure in the people that you're trying to influence, definitely. We've got a few more minutes here, Sarah, so I'm gonna just round this off, I guess, with our final question that we always ask, unless there's any more questions come in the chat. We always ask, as we finish off these streams, what's your one tip? So Sarah, what would be your one tip for people looking to make more of the opportunities out there for data and analytics and professional services growth?
So, I mean, as a marketer or you know, in a similar role, I think we've already touched on this, but my one tip is to get familiar with the softwares available and put yourself through training for data and analytics. So whether that's going on the basic Google Analytics course, whether it's even sitting down with, you know, your data experts, if that's how your business is set up, and understanding, you know, the data that your firm's currently collecting, the scope of what you can collect and how you can use it. Just get as much knowledge as you can. And then also if you want to then explore that into more options or to progress that even further, make sure you're asking for the time and the resource from your firm to then, you know, become the expert or to take that project on. But there's so much opportunity within data, and from a firm's perspective as well, and as a manager, to give your team time and you know, the money to go and do that is also really valuable. But make sure, you know, in your team that you're...
Oh, I think we might have just lost you there for that.
Oh, did you just lose me? Where did I get to?
Make sure you're asking for that resource within your team.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. We've just had one final question come in here from someone who'd prefer to remain anonymous. Unlike a B2C or e-commerce environment, how can data influence the way we market human intelligence? So lawyers and accountants. I would be the first person to say I'm not an expert in e-commerce. So I'm sure that when you have a larger market or larger segment category that you're trying to operate in, you have more opportunity for things like split testing. You have more opportunity for a wide reach that lets you use data to make decisions much faster. So I think within the professional services environment, you need to take a leaf out of Jaya's book and try to use more qualitative data. I think data within professional services, you've also got a lot more opportunity because you have big clients. You can put more effort into finding the data points for small numbers of people. So it's worth it in professional services to go through your fee earners, you know, as an example we use in Passel here, to go through the people within your firm who they're interacting with on LinkedIn and make a list of those people and say, this is the reach of this particular campaign. Equally, it's worth the time to go through your webinars and take the names and the people that are interacting and use that to say, this is who we've reached as part of this outreach. That's probably different from what you can do in B2C or e-commerce, where you have much larger groups of people and individuals don't matter as much. I'd say probably one of the more interesting things that I've come across lately has been people using a target segment and then trying to come up with a coverage. So looking at we're trying to reach, let's say fintech companies. We're trying to reach the top 50 fintech companies in the UK. And what we've done, we've got a list of those, and that's come from a provider. We want to have reached within that list all of those 50 or a sample of those 50 people before the end of the year, or we have ongoing conversations with them. In professional services and in those B2B spaces, you can actually do a coverage map and say, we aim as a firm to get coverage of 75% of that market. And that's not impossible to measure if you've only got 50 firms. You could even do a frequency and look at how many times you reach them within that market. So there's potential for more manual data, but the value of that data is higher per data point, if that makes sense. I hope that answers the question. I think there's probably a thesis to be written written there, and so I'm sure
This is going a bit off topic for data, but I mean, one of the best ways to market human intelligence in professional services is, to give your experts a voice, get them writing content, get that content to market. It's such a good way to really get that expertise out there and to market those individuals who have so much expertise to display and to write about. Nice.
Well, that wraps it up, Sarah. You had your one piece of advice. I think that's brilliant. That whole idea of ask for that time, make it something that you're doing to develop yourself. I really think strongly as a marketer, your value, the wage that you can command, all of that comes from the skill that you bring, and data is definitely a key part of that.
Yeah. Sorry, just to add, I spoke about quite a bit about finding out what technology your firm uses and using the data within that, just as an example there. So obviously Passel is essentially a piece of software, but alongside that, it's the consultancy that you get with it. But a lot of the time my clients are asking me, what's the best way to collect data or to use the data within Passel, and obviously I'm very, very much on hand to tell them that and to help them use the data we have in Passel to help them, achieve their objectives. So don't be afraid to look at the different softwares, technologies that you've got, and actually reach out to, I don't know, whether it's a client success or an account manager there, and just make sure you're up to speed with exactly, the what that technology can do in terms of data analytics.
You might find that there's a course that software company
might be a course, it might be you can have a conversation with someone, but there's bound to be some insight into the data analytics that you can collect on that platform.
Brilliant. No, I love that. So we're going to leave it there. So thank you so much, Sarah, for coming on. It's been really great to have you.
Thanks, everyone.
Chat about data. That's wicked. Thank you, everyone who asked questions in the chat. That's brilliant, that kind of interaction. We do these live streams every month, and it's a great way of bringing people within the professional services community together that probably wouldn't be able to interface as much, especially at the moment. So thank you so much for coming along and asking those questions. And thanks again, Sarah, for being here. It's great to have you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, and have a great rest of the week, everyone, and weekend when it comes.
Cheers, guys. Bye.
Thanks.